Do you have anything you want to cover?
Nope.
Sweet. Welcome to NCRAG. Tonight is the best decision-making tool for evaluating real estate decisions, which, why are you laughing?
That's 2 decisions in there.
You wrote it. That's your title.
I thought it was investments.
My title is like how to apply all the cool stuff in poker to real estate.
I thought it was the best decision-making tool for real estate investments or something like
Nope.
that. Oh, really?
That's what I thought it was. Coming up for classes next Wednesday, James is teaching a class on how to create deals in a deal-less market. James, other than being amazing, how is that class going to be?
It's going to be amazing. So the class is based on the return on investment quadrant and how to move returns from one quadrant to another. So if you're struggling with cash flow deals, which is basically what I think most people are complaining about, is they can't find cash flowing deals, we will show you how to move areas of return from depreciation or debt pay down or appreciation to the cash flow quadrant of the real estate return on investment quadrant. So
Nice. And then apparently the following week, we should probably talk about teaching this class. Your name's first, so you're on the hook first.
not true.
Totally true. When real estate investing goes horribly wrong, so a lot of times we talk about how to analyze deals, how to find tenants, how to go find deals in the deal-less market, all the stuff that's like, hey, this is how you go invest in real estate. I don't think we've ever really done a class on what happens when stuff really goes wrong. So we're going to try and do that. I don't know how that'll go. Probably horribly wrong. And then the following week, James, what are you teaching?
I'm going to go over all the stuff you need to know if you're buying new houses, whether you're doing them as an investment or you're doing it as an owner-occupant nomad. We'll go over all the stuff that's specific to new construction, buying new houses.
So this would have been helpful for me?
It would have been really helpful for you.
Man. Gosh. And then the following week, which is the end of September, kiss summer goodbye. It's pretty much over. Get your side hustle on. So there's a request for me to teach how to do Amazon FBA class. This is basically that class, but thrown in some other side hustle stuff that you can do. So if you're interested in the Amazon stuff, don't miss that class because James will probably never let me teach it again.
That's correct.
But it really is about how to earn more money outside your normal job so that you could save up down payments faster to actually invest in real estate. So that is the class schedule. I don't know what's next after that. Introductions. James, you got the mic. So question for the night. Introduce yourself. James, he learned real estate by watching late night TV. And how does he evaluate risk now? He doesn't. So James, you can just give the mic to Tammy.
All right. I was James Orr. Here's Tammy.
Do I get you to do my introduction
No.
too? Okay, I'm Tammy.
Well, I can, but James won't like it.
James is my husband. And what was the question? I'm sorry, I was very distracted. What was the question?
How do you evaluate risk now?
I don't know. I spend time thinking about what actually all the risks are, and then I would say I have a lower risk tolerance probably than James does. We discussed this recently with
Mine's pretty low.
You can go wherever you want.
I'm Mary, and how do I evaluate risk now? I just try to get as much information as I can.
Hi, I'm Paul. Risk?
What risk?
I'd say most of the time I try to put it into a spreadsheet, and then gut feeling and how much tolerance I have that day, maybe that week.
Hi, my name is Donna, and I do use Brian's spreadsheet on evaluating properties, and a lot of it's my gut feeling too. When I go into a property, it's got to feel right to me to begin with, or I don't even do the spreadsheet. So.
My name's Pam, and actually I haven't gotten into it yet at all, so that's why I'm here at the class.
Awesome. Cool. Just hand the mic behind you. That'd be awesome.
I'm Brandon, and probably evaluate risk, doing as much studying as possible, and then just trust my gut.
Hi, I'm Caitlin. I'm not sure this mic is working, but I might be wrong.
It doesn't project your voice. It's recording for the
Oh, sorry.
podcast. Yep.
Okay. So I need to learn how to evaluate risk more because I'm one of those people who gets really excited about something, and I probably need to learn how to take a step back and actually evaluate. So that's my answer.
That's the sign we actually need on the board is the mic won't project your voice because everyone thinks that we should. Yes. Yes.
Hi, I'm Josh Plave, and I evaluate risks purely based on numbers.
I'm James. I'm kind of in that gray area between doing it by feel, which is what I used to do, and with the education I'm getting here, I'm trying to learn how to do it by the numbers and set those limits and stick to them.
Jeff, I'm new to this, but I'd say I evaluate risk based off of my banking history.
Nice.
I am Heather. Are we talking about risk for tenants, taking on the tenants, or purchasing the property?
Whatever kind of risk you would like to think about and how you evaluate that.
Okay.
More focused probably on how you purchase a house.
Oh, spreadsheets.
My name's Mike. I use spreadsheets. I use my mentors, partners, past experience. And if it's out of the area, I just try to find even non-real estate people with as much local knowledge as I can.
Cool.
Hi, I'm Denise, and I like to stay current on market trends and demographics to get a feel for where things are at. Go from there.
Hello, I'm Nick. Probably research stuff way overboard, way too much, and overanalyze it. But then after that, create an overall picture, including all variables to see an overall picture of the deal.
Is it bad if insurance Brian says he flips a coin to evaluate risk?
He uses an, I figured he'd be like, I use an actuary table or something.
No, as far as real estate goes, spreadsheets, numbers, a lot of evaluation, market stats, lots of stuff.
We'll talk about flipping coins later. Get your wallets ready, people.
I'm Austin. Historically, we've done mortgage tools like Encompass, Mortgage Coach, any numbers we can find online, gut feeling. This last purchase, kind of in the process, but we utilized your spreadsheet and loved it, so thank you. But other than that, just learning as much as we can as we go.
Yeah, I would just add kind of identifying the top priorities as well and seeing which meets the most of those.
My name's Allie, and I'm actually with Jim, and he's the one that does all the research and the spreadsheets.
I'm the analytical of the pair, and I do a lot of research and use spreadsheets.
Nice.
Hi, I'm Marina, and I'm new to this, so still hoping to learn how.
Perfect.
My name is Sai. I evaluate using spreadsheets, all the numbers I can find, and some research.
Cool. We'll come back over it, bring it around.
I'm Lynn, and I evaluate risk with a bunch of analysis, and I like talking to a bunch of different property managers in the location that I'm looking at.
I'm Kevin, and I'm still figuring it out as well.
I'm Dan, and I have yet to use it.
Hi there, I'm Dave, and just education is really good. Checking with, like you said, mentors and people that are knowledgeable in your area that you're interested in. Just looking at all the different threats, different levels, you know, looking at the back end first and then working it forward, and just looking if the numbers work.
Cool. Just, yeah.
I'm Daphne, and I do my research, look at stats, and then use spreadsheets as well.
My name's Paul, pretty new to the real estate, so I don't really figure out my risk yet, but just basically not putting too much of your total assets into one deal, making sure you can fight for another day, and kind of projecting out what do you think your expected rate of return is going to be on that particular deal, so that over the long run, you'll get some winners and losers, but you'll be ahead in the long run.
I'm Cooper, and I'm still trying to figure this out, so.
Hi, sorry I was late. My name's Jason, and I'm pretty much just getting started. I've been trying to come to these for about a month now, and this was the first one I could make.
Cool.
Oh, wait. You get.
Hi, I'm Allison, and I try to get as much research as I can and consult the experts that I know.
And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Brian Williams, long-term buy and hold investor in Northern Colorado, and former professional poker player. So, how many of you came to learn to play poker tonight? Yeah, sorry. James, can we run a game afterwards? Sure. Yeah. Brian's like, don't do it. So I want to preface the class by saying there's a ton of information in poker, and I haven't played serious poker in several years at this point. And so I went back and even did some research in some books that are still on my shelf. And so I'm not going to do an in-depth, super deep math dive tonight, which I know James is going to be super disappointed about, because that's what he was hoping for. But he's not going to get that because I don't think it's appropriate. But tonight, hopefully, we'll cover kind of a whole bunch of different techniques that you can use in poker that actually apply to real estate, and we'll dig into those. And if you guys have questions or I use poker terms that don't make sense to you, please ask, because I won't even know that I'm saying it. It will just come out. So I started playing Texas No Limit Hold'em in the second quarter of 2004. I had a friend at Microsoft who said, hey, do you play poker? And I was like, no. And I went and looked it up, and it turns out you can play online. And I was like, I'm really good at games. I can totally make money doing this. So of course, I deposited a lot of money into an online account and lost about $600 at a time for weeks at a time, and eventually was down almost $5,000 bucks. And I was like, all right, now I'm pissed off, right? So I dug in. I started studying, because a lot of people think, oh, it's a game like blackjack where you go and you just play and it's you versus the house, and that's actually not the case. The casino actually loses money typically on having a poker room, but it's when people walk in the door, they gamble on the way to the poker room and they gamble on the way out, especially if they win. There is one particular person who won $2 million, and 3 days later it was gone because he can't stay away from the craps table, right? So it's crazy stuff like that where that's where the casino makes their money. The casino isn't playing against you when you play poker. If you don't know, there's a dealer at the table, but you're playing against everyone else at the table, none of whom are casino employees, at least not on the clock. So I started studying. I dropped down in limits. So I stopped playing the higher limit games. I started playing lower limit games to learn, and really started playing seriously and not just trying to essentially get rich quick. So what does that sound like? It's like, oh, hey, I can go do this real estate thing and I can get rich quick. Right? There's your first parallel of the night. And there's a lot of people that come to class and they're like, hey, I can go wholesale and I can make $200,000 a year. Sounds great in practice. How hard is that in reality? Anyone try it? It's really difficult, right? It's probably not going to happen right away. That doesn't mean it's impossible, right? There are plenty of people making really good money playing poker, but they've gone through this entire learning thing, and it's a constant learn. So by the end of the year, I earned my money that I had lost back. That was the first goal. Pulled it all out. I was like, all right, now it's all winnings. We're good from here, and earned a lot more by the end of the year. My best month ever, I tried to go back and look. I didn't have all my records. So the best month out of my records that I had was 20K up, and my worst month was 8K down. So poker is one of those few jobs where you can go to work, you can put in your 6 or 8 or 12 or 20-hour day, and you can go home with a negative paycheck, right? Imagine going to work today, and when you leave, they're like, hey, you owe us $600. You're like, now do that for months at a time. So it's a very different mindset in that if you don't have a bankroll that's big enough and you lose money, you will start to play very differently. So that also applies to real estate in terms of how you've got reserves, right? If you don't have enough reserves and stuff starts going wrong, you might make different decisions that aren't the decisions you'd make if you had a large reserve fund. James has already taken notes. That's good. In 2007, I took a 3-month sabbatical from Microsoft to go test drive poker in Vegas. I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. Rented a house down there, went down there and played, and then very quickly moved, left Microsoft in 2008 and started playing professionally in 2009. I was there for 3 years. Vegas is a fantastic place to spend a weekend. It's not a fantastic place to live. The weather's great. Having a pool in your backyard is great. But people aren't, I'm a Midwest person, so people are just not friendly. You drive through my hometown and people wave at you, even when you've got a Kentucky license plate on your car from a rental car company. They're just waving, right? And I grew up in Iowa. So Vegas is very difficult to make friends and to have kind of genuine relationships. So I ended up moving here after that, but I played poker at Poker Stars. This is odd. I moved to Vegas to play poker, yet most of my time I spent playing online. Why would I do such a silly thing? Mostly because I could play tons and tons of tables. So this is one monitor. There's another monitor sitting right next to it that looks exactly the same. Each one of these screens is basically a different game. So I was playing 24 games at the same time, taking notes on all the people, watching their stats. You can't see it in this picture, but there's little black boxes with rows and rows of stats that are kept on each player. So that's what I did for 3 years. And I played most of my time when I was live. I played at the Bellagio, which some people hate and some people love. I only got kicked out of one poker room, which is very similar to NCREG. And James is probably really nervous about the story I'm about to tell. So I was in Caesars. Probably shouldn't say that on the mic. I was in a random casino in Vegas because they do have a lot of power and money. And it was, occasionally you go to play poker just to have fun, right? And it's not just a job. So I sat down at a very low limit table in this casino, wasn't paying much attention. It was like 2 in the morning, just there to have a couple hours of fun. And one of the dealers was dealing. There were 2 other people in the hand. And basically, this guy raised, this guy said all in, this guy said call. The whole table saw it. This guy flipped up his cards. The dealer pushed the pot to one of the guys and took both of their cards and mucked them without actually dealing the rest of the hand. And I was like, everybody's like, whoa, what are you doing? And when they muck your cards, they shove them into the rest of the deck that's already on the table. So it's very difficult to figure out which cards are whose. So we'd all seen this person had ace queen and this person had ace king, and it wouldn't have mattered except for there was a possibility with the 2 cards left to be dealt that there would be a flush. And so they call the floor, which is always a pain. The floor people are always kind of rude. Floor comes over, and again, it's 2 in the morning. These guys are drunk, so for context. And the floor basically starts berating the player, right? Like, hey, how do you not know what ace you had? Was it the ace of clubs? Was it the ace of spades? And I'm normally a fairly calm guy, but when this stuff starts happening to people for no reason, I tend to kick into defensive mode and want to defend them. And so that's what happened. And I kind of lost it when he finally said, how do you not know what color your ace was? Was it a green ace? And I kind of maybe dropped an F-bomb at him. And then he was like, don't use the F word, sir. And I was like, you can imagine what I said back to him. He's like, seriously, don't use the F word. And I was like, beep, 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 beep. And I'm like, you can't berate players like that. And so he was like, you know, if you say it again, you know, you're going to have to leave. And I was like, I'm not going anywhere. And he turns to his other floor person and is like, call security. I was like, that's my cue that I'm actually leaving. So how does that relate to NCREG? I think it's the ability. You know, I think it's the ability to know that you should be treating people fairly, right? We don't treat people like that at NCREG. We don't treat tenants that way. That's not the right thing to do. And so there came a time where I actually was interviewing for a job at this particular casino where my boss would have been the VP who oversaw the poker room. And I was like, man, if I get that job, I'm so getting Dwight fired. So it's like, Dwight at Caesars, look out. Somebody will hear that and they'll be like, oh, I remember that conversation. So I didn't really get kicked out. I chose to leave, but I'm pretty sure they were going to come remove me if I didn't get up and go. So that's my poker background. Some of these slides, this is a really weird presentation, I'll be honest. The flow of this presentation I think will be very different than most because there's lots of different topics in poker that apply to real estate as I found it. So many of you guys have probably asked me a question at some point after class like, hey, do you think I should buy this property? And usually I'm like, well, it depends. And in fact, Last year at the Christmas party, somebody actually gave me a gift, and it was like a set of Depends underwear. So that's how many times I actually say that. But if you go ask an experienced poker player, hey, how would you play this hand? They're almost always going to say, it depends, because it almost always does depend, because every situation is unique, right? Depends on who you were playing against. It depends on what level you're playing at. It depends on your bankroll. It depends on lots of stuff. You know, you're getting the same reply about real estate. It depends, because it really does. What does it depend on? It depends on you, right? It depends on what your goals are, right? In poker, it's your stack size, your opponent's your image. In real estate, it could be your income. It could be what your end goals are, your why to actually get there. So I'm even forgetting this monitor is here now that you so kindly moved it for me. I'm like looking at this, like I have it right here. You know, what your portfolio looks like now. So it really does depend. So it's not like an easy way to get out of saying, oh, I would totally buy that property. It just really depends. And normally I'm like, what's your goal? Why do you want to get there? Does that lead you more towards your cash flow goal? So when you hear that answer, it's the same in many, many fields. Probably in whatever field you work in, you can probably draw a parallel to that as well. Absolute versus relative dollars. James. Yes. Your opponent in poker just bet $200. Is that a big bet or a small bet? He's contemplating really hard, for those of you that can't see him.
It depends.
Well played. So for everyone in the room, other than it depends, does that seem like a big bet or a small bet? How many people think that's a big bet? How many people think it's a small bet? How many people didn't raise their hands? Right. So the problem is you don't know, and it does depend. What does it depend on to you, James?
I think the relative size of the other bets and how much is currently in the middle of the table.
Sure. So
also how much I have in my stack in front of me.
Right. So if you sat down at the table with $300, $200 seems like an awfully big bet relative to what you have. But if you sat down with $100,000, this is like a blind, right? This is just you're being forced to put this in every loop around the table. So how about $10? Is that a small bet? Like most people would probably say, yeah, that's a small bet. But it may not be. If you're playing an online game where, you know, it's a $10 buy-in, that's your entire stack. So there's the absolute value, which we think a lot about in our heads, and then there's the relative value of how does it relate to what else? So in real estate, if you were going to go buy a house, is $350,000 a lot to pay for a house? How many people think so? How many people are not going to raise their hands when I ask the other side of this question? How many people think that's a small price to pay for a house? Why are you raising your hand?
I don't know.
Because you're from California now?
Yeah, I was thinking California.
Yeah, so how much does it cost to have like a one-bedroom kind of small studio apartment in New York City? If you were to own one. At least 7 figures, right? You're at least $1 million. So relatively, this seems like it's cheap. However, here, that's like a normal price to pay. How about $500 per month in rent? Is that a big number in rent or a small number? Seems small, right? You immediately go, that's not much. But if you bought a house in, I don't know, let's say Iowa, the house prices, I was trying to think of something else because Iowa's prices are going up, right? But if you bought a $75,000 house and you were getting $500 a month in rent, that doesn't seem so bad, right? So context really matters. And if you just blindly treat anybody's dollar amounts as absolutes, you're probably going to be making mistakes in both poker, for sure, and real estate. Because if you're like, oh, it's a $300 bet, that's too big, I'm going to fold, you're probably losing out on a lot of money. The other thing that this comes into, which is probably what James is about to say, is when you hear other investors talk about their cash flow numbers. Context matters. Hey, we heard this last week. Was that last week?
It seems like forever ago, but I think it
Seems
was
like
last week.
3 weeks ago since we were here. So last week, you heard someone that James was interviewing talk about their cash flow numbers, and you even heard James and I go, that can't possibly be right. But it was because it was, this is what I'm getting in cash flow and rent, $1,000, minus my mortgage, which is $800, so I'm making $200 a month. But that's not how we analyze properties, so you need the context. You want to add something?
I'll just add that, having talked to tons of investors over the years, some come in and, they say, I want to get $100 a door or something like that. So this is just an arbitrary number in a lot of ways. It's not relative versus absolute.
Right, and $100 a door here is very different than $100 a door in Iowa or $100 a door in Indianapolis. So think about that. So there's a lot of player types in poker, and there's only a couple types that tend to be winning players. And so I tried to relate this to real estate players, but basically up here you've got aggressive players, down here you've got your passive players, right? In poker, being aggressive tends to make you more money than being passive. Being passive is like someone bets and you just call their bet, you never raise a lot. And then over here we've got James, who's very loose when he plays poker, right? And you've got some other people over here who play much, much tighter. And on the kind of corners of that are when you've got somebody who's just wants to play any hand, and he's really loose and he's aggressive, you have James, and that's called a maniac. In poker, yes. And on the opposite end of that, you've got the nit, who really is looking to play like ace-ace, king-king, queen-queen, and maybe ace-king. Like they're not playing much else. And if they don't have the best hand, they're not betting at all. And even then they're not. And what you'll notice is, James plays too many hands, right? He's very aggressive, but he has a super high variance in wins and losses. James, out of the poker games that I played, James has been in like 10 buy-ins and then walked away with 20 buy-ins, right? Some nights he'll just lose his 10 buy-ins, but it's very high variance, right? Win a lot, lose a lot, not a lot in the middle. So that's kind of what you would call a loose aggressive player. The tight aggressive player, actually I'm going to go loose passive first. So if James were to tone it down and not be so aggressive, and he just kind of called all the time instead of raising, right? He'd call with his good hands. That'd be like you have the best hand, and instead of wanting to make more money, you're just like, I'm going to just call because I'm scared that he might actually have a better hand and I could lose more. And that's going to be key in tonight's discussion. If he does raise, if this player ever raises, they have the absolute nuts. You can just fold because they're not raising most of the other time. And generally, they're not winning, right? At least this person wins a lot and loses a lot. The player down here doesn't really win a lot. So if we shift over and we tighten that person up in poker, they call with good hands. Again, not a good idea. And if this person raises, you definitely know. This is the person that sits at the table and plays like 2 hands every hour. And when they play, you know you need a monster hand to beat them. But if you don't hit your monster hand, you just fold. So tight aggressive, right? The tag is what they're known as. This is basically someone who is playing a select set of hands and they are raising and they're being aggressive with their hands. This is typically where you will see most winning players. There are some very special players who are over here who have the ability to win. I'm not sure if James is in that winning category or not. You'd have to ask him.
I think I play when I'm playing. I think I'm tight passive, but apparently I'm not.
You think you're tight passive? Jeez. That's like no, not even close. So how does this possibly relate, Brian, to actual real estate? So that loose passive person that James thinks he is, which he's not, right? That person that's just calling with good hands, this is someone that in real estate probably isn't raising their rent regularly, right? They're just, hey, I've got a good tenant, they're paying rent, I don't want them to leave, I'm scared of them leaving, so I don't raise my rent. They probably aren't managing their relationships properly with their tenants or their property manager. And they're generally not making enough money in real estate investing, right? Or not nearly as much as they could be making. So that's kind of your calling station. James, you still think that's you?
No, I thought I was tight passive.
Oh, you thought you were tight passive?
Yeah, I thought it was the rock.
Dude, you play every hand. Yeah. So if you're James in real estate, as he plays poker, not as he plays real estate, right? Basically, you would buy almost any property aggressively.
Everything you see looks good.
Yeah. Hey, this is a good deal. I'm totally going to go buy this. Oh, you're going to pay $200,000? I'll pay $250,000, right? That's James playing poker in real estate. Oh, you want to go all in? Let's go. That's James, right? Like, let's put it in the middle, right? You're overpaying for your deals, you're going to have some huge wins because occasionally one of those that you overpay for is going to be a home run, right? But most of the time, that's not going to happen. You're also going to have some huge losses. So this is what James thinks he is. He thinks he's The Rock. This isn't Dwayne Johnson. Maybe that's what you're going for. Right? The type passive really doesn't want to risk a lot of stuff, right? They're looking to wait until they've got the best of it and then try to get all their money in. However, if you're sitting at a poker table and you're gambling against someone who doesn't play many hands and suddenly they're very aggressive, you're like, well, you clearly have a great hand. I'm going to fold. So do they make much money on their good hands? No, because you know exactly what they have. They've not disguised it at all. They're only going to buy home runs, but the problem is they're not aggressive enough to actually take the home runs down because they're scared of losing. So they make offers on home runs only, but then they don't get accepted because someone else is beating them to it. And finally, the tight aggressive, we're not going to cover the maniac and the nit here, but the tight aggressive in real estate, right? You go and you find the great deals and you make an aggressive offer on it. You're playing to win, but you're playing aggressively on deals that actually matter. You're actually managing your property manager well. You're controlling the relationships with your tenants well. You're managing them well. You're setting expectations with them. And you're probably a long-term profitable investor. So those are kind of the 4 main poker types of players and kind of how they relate to real estate. Any questions on that?
While we're waiting for questions, I'll make one comment, and that this reminds me, it's presented very differently, but it reminds me of the real estate investor book where they talk about the 4 different investor types, the collector, the whatever the other ones are and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yep. I thought about that when I was doing it, and I was like, I'm not going to connect it.
Yeah, if you haven't read that book, it's worth reading. The Millionaire Real Estate Investor.
There's also a podcast of the book review. Pretty sure we have that.
Okay. Yeah, go visit that on our podcast.
Yeah, if you don't want to read the book. But it's a good book to have in your library and read it more than once. You'll read it now, you'll be like, oh, I learned some stuff. You'll read it in a year, you'll be like, whoa, I totally didn't see that the first time I read it. So the goal is to win the most money when you're playing poker, and I think in real estate, right? We're not doing this as a hobby to just give some random people places to live. We're actually doing this to make money. So as you might guess, most poker players are pretty competitive, right? They're especially ones that are doing it full time. They've chosen to pursue a career where you have to be better at gambling than someone else. And so I'm very competitive, probably the most competitive person that James knows, or very close, right? And they'll take all sorts of bets. So if you've never heard any of the crazy prop bet stories, somebody actually prop bet another guy in Vegas.
What's a prop bet?
Proposition bet. Just like, hey, James, I bet you can't sit on that stool and not move your legs for the rest of class.
Yeah, I'd lose that bet.
Yep. So one of them was they basically said, the guy said, I could totally stand in the ocean with water up to my neck for 24 hours. And so they bet like $10,000 on it. He went out of the ocean, and 3 hours later, he came walking in to basically negotiate to pay off the bet because he knew he was going to lose. One of the most famous prop bets of all time was that someone offered to pay another guy $100,000 if he would get breast implants. And so he actually won the $4,500 playing backgammon to actually have the operation done, and actually got size 38C breast implants, and he had to keep them for a year. So you think this is funny. The guy probably made more than $100,000 off of taking pictures with people and showing his boobs essentially to other people, because it wasn't like he's a guy, and so it wasn't as inappropriate as you would have thought, but it was very kind of weird. And so how long do you think he actually kept him?
2 months.
Yeah, he kept him like 20 years.
Oh, really?
He just recently had him taken out. I mean, he was famous for doing it, and he got paid the $100,000. There's another famous one where there's a really strict vegetarian professional poker player, and they basically, a guy at the table said, I'll pay you $10,000 to eat a hamburger. And he just was like, bring the hamburger to the table. He ate it and was like, give me 10 grand. It's like, he'd been a vegetarian his entire life. It's like 10 grand to eat a hamburger. Yep. And he didn't need the 10 grand, right? The guy already had millions of dollars, but it's just the, oh, you seriously bet me that? Like, I will totally go, right? So
it's like you bet me to drink the beverage in the yard.
What did I offer to pay you?
I don't remember, but it was getting higher.
Yeah, so James and I were out looking at a property once, and there was like a empty Bud Light can or something in the front yard, but it had a little bit of something left in it. Don't know what it was. And I was like, how much for you to drink this? Right? And I'm like, I'll give you $10. And I'm fairly sure I got up to at least like $1,000. And he's still like, no. I'm like, you won't drink like one swallow of this for $1,000. He's like, no. I have plenty of friends who would have just like eaten the can for $1,000. So the goal in poker is only play to win money, not every pot. So super competitive people, they're like, oh, I'm in another pot. I want to win the pot. No, it doesn't work that way, nor should it in real estate. If you're trying to like take down every single deal, you're going to end up losing money. You'd rather win big pots and lose little pots. That's actually how you make money in poker. You focus on getting your money in with the best of it and getting out of the hand when you know you don't have a good chance.
So I'd like to pause there for a second, because for people that have just heard this for the first time, the idea of losing as part of winning may be kind of strange to them. Do you want to talk about that now, or are you going to get to it later?
I think I'm going to get to it later. But yes, watch out for the dangerous cords in the front of the classroom when you walk up here. I erased the dangerous part off the whiteboard, yeah. So in real estate, right, play to win the deals that matter. Be that tight, aggressive player, and let the rest go, right? And I will tell you, if you don't know what FOMO is, it's fear of missing out. Like, there is a competitive part of me that, like, when Brendan says, hey, like, I'm taking down this deal, I'm totally like, oh, man, I wish I had that deal, right? It's like, that's just me. I'm like, oh, I totally could have bought that deal. I could have, like, beat him to it. But it's like, okay, who cares, right? There's enough in poker and in real estate, there's enough abundance that it doesn't matter, right? Your friends can buy deals too. If you tell somebody about a deal and they go buy it, fantastic. It's not really that big of a deal. You want to comment on abundance at all? Because you have a...
Yeah, I don't know if I want to do it right now, but maybe I'll hold it for later.
Sure. In poker, right, if you put a lot of money into a pot, you should rarely fold. If you stick a third or more of the money in front of you into a pot, you've bet it into the current hand, it's very rare that you should actually fold, because you've already invested a substantial portion of what you have in front of you. This one was a tough one. So in real estate, I think this is kind of true, but I think it depends, right? If you put a lot of money into a property and it turns out the market where you're at really takes a dive and it needs a bunch of work and it's going to be this huge nightmare, it might actually be better to let it go. In poker, that's not the case in almost all cases.
Are you going to talk about Vegas?
In what sense?
The property you lived in?
Oh, you want to talk about that?
I was kind of curious. It seemed like it fit here.
So James and I disagree on what I actually did with my house. So I owned a house in Vegas. I'm going to have to come up with the numbers here. Roughly, I paid $500,000 for the house. It was like, it'd be worth, I don't know, 1.3 million if it was in Fort Collins right now. Like 5,000 square foot house, put a pool in the backyard. And then that was at the bottom of the market. So people in that same neighborhood of about 80 houses had paid over $1 million for that house less than 3 years ago. So there's a weird thing for them, because they bought their amounts to being their dream house, and now what do? They're essentially going to pay money into this house that's really just wasted money, because it's not really paying the value of the house down. They couldn't turn around and sell it. So they're going to pay money for years and years and years into this house before they actually start getting equity into the house, right? So for me, when I moved, I was like, I tried to rent the house. I thought about lease optioning in the house, and then I had a tenant. They were supposed to be there, and then they were going to buy the house. They had lived in that neighborhood before. This happens to be the person that's in prison for loan fraud. So he's not living in the house anymore. He was also a realtor, but he basically ended up selling the house for me because he was going to move out. And I'm like, well, you're going to sell it for me with no commission since you're breaking your lease. He said, okay. And he sold it, and I ended up taking a loss on the house. Had I just held the house for another 2 years, I probably would have made $100,000 to $150,000 in equity. But for me, it wasn't worth it. I was done with Vegas, and I wanted to be completely done because I was in Fort Collins and I was doing other things. You want to comment on your Thoughts
I
on
don't know.
this?
It seems to me like the dollar amounts were relevant here, but I don't know if you're being sensitive about those numbers. But when you have a lot into a house and you think to yourself, I could potentially lose this money from selling it and taking a loss on it, then I think the amount you have invested is a factor.
Yeah, and so I mean, I wanted my money back out of the house. So this is one of the few times where I put more than 20% down on my own personal property, and I had a lot of money in it from selling the house I lived in Redmond. And so I was like, I want the money out of the house. And that's really, I was like, I don't want the property value to go down more. And so there was some avoidance of the risk, but there was a lot of, I'm just done. And so for me, it was a personal decision. Do I wish I would have held on to it? For the money, yes, but it doesn't bother me. I think it bothers James more.
It does. I think it does bother me more than it bothers you.
Yeah. Another saying in poker is, don't build a big pot unless you're willing to go all in, right? And this kind of applies to real estate. If you're going to go do some huge real estate investment project and you're going to go build a 20-unit building, right, and you're not willing to go all in to make sure it works, really think about whether it's something you want to do.
How would you think about that in terms of a partnership where you're a limited partner and you're coming in with $20,000 or $30,000 or $50,000 as part of the partner? Are you willing to come in and fund the rest of it in order to take over the deal if that's what it takes?
I don't think so. I think if you're a limited partner, you're choosing to be a limited partner for a reason, right?
Okay.
If you're in a, hey, we're in a 50-50 partnership and we're going to go buy 50 houses, right? We should be prepared and have that discussion up front. What's all in for us, right? Any questions on that? Perfect. I haven't said any poker terms that no one's understood yet. Someone's like, I don't know what he even meant there. What's poker? Paul? No. I can't explain poker. So there's a fundamental theory of poker, and basically I'm going to apply this to making offers. I don't want to get it wrong. I keep turning around even though James nicely moved the screen. So every time you play a hand differently from the way you would have played it if you could see all of your opponent's cards, right, they gain. If you turned all the cards up and you were like, hey, would I make this play if I knew what your hand was? I sure would. Then I'm going to gain, right? If I make the wrong play, he gains, even if I still win the pot, right? Because I may not win as much. Conversely, every time opponents play their hand differently from the way they would have played it if they could see all of your cards, you gain, right? Does that make sense? So offer-wise, right, it's like the fundamental theory of offers, right? If you take this and think, what?
Trademark.
I know, I forgot to put that in here. I totally meant to put that. I think I changed the title of my slide. It's like going to be fundamental theorem of offers, TM, just for James since he likes to trademark everything. So if you think about making an offer on a property, right? If James is going to go make an offer on a property, which let me use somebody, I'll use Brendan, right? Brendan's going to go make an offer on a property, and I'm going to make an offer on the same property. If I make my offer $50,000 above his offer and I win, I won the property, which is great. I was being aggressive, I was playing the right role, but I probably paid $49,000 too much for it. So if I would have been able to see what he was going to offer, I would have made a different offer to still win. And I would have not lost or not spent as much money, right? Conversely, if he could see what I was going to do, he would probably offer $1,000 more or $1 more or make his offer more attractive in some way like that. Does that make sense? Think about what your opponents are doing. And this is the abundance thing again. If Brendan goes and buys a property, that's fine. And I'm like, oh, I really wish I could have that property. There's more property to buy. It's out there. There's an abundance. I think sharing information both in this business, and I'm sure you'll hear it in the Amazon class as well, there's an abundance of stuff. There's an abundance of wealth to be had. It's not limited. So it's not like, oh, there's only 10 houses and Brendan got 3 of them, so there's only 7 left I can get, and I'm competing against everyone else. It doesn't work that way. In poker, there's an abundance of money. It's just harder to get. Perfect poker strategy. Does this exist? No? Everyone's like, no. You just play like James. That's pretty much it. Yeah, there's like the maniac corner, and then there's a corner above that that just says full maniac, in parentheses, James. Yes. So let's imagine for a minute there was a perfect poker strategy, and if you used it, you could play against any of those player types and win, Would you be the best player? How many people think you would be the best player? I see heads nodding, but hands not going up. You have to vote. Would you be the best player? Yes. Would you be the best player? No. How many people? Somebody that raised, who says no? Put your hands up high. So why not? Why would you not be the best player if you could play against any player type and win?
You could be a mediocre player. It would have to be great strength. It would have to be volume of hand.
Okay, so you're just talking volume of hands. So I think the question is, it's not volume of hands, and it's not whether you're immediate. You have the best strategy. Doesn't matter. You have the right play to win against any player type. So even if you're a crappy poker player, you can use a little cheat sheet or whatever and make the right play, right? But would you be the best in terms of win rate? Would you be making the most money playing the same games? And no, you wouldn't. You definitely wouldn't. And this is really the core of, if you only take one thing away from this class, I think this kind of coming stuff is it. Because this is a defensive strategy, right? It helps you win against every player, but are you winning the maximum that you could have won? And that's the problem, is you're not, right? How do you win the maximum? It means you go on the attack and that you are aggressive, right? It's that tag, the tight aggressive player. You go on the attack and you become aggressive, even if it exposes yourself to some of the risk. And that's how the best players actually win. They are taking marginal edges and they are pushing them to the max. If I can bet $1 million against Paul and I have any advantage, I'm placing that bet. And Paul's like, yeah, we're 50-50. I'm like, I got 0.01. He's like, it's close enough. I'm like, excellent, let's bet, right? And that's how the best players are actually winning the most money.
You just got to be able to stick it out.
Yes, we'll talk about that as well. So this is important, right? Aggressive offers, being aggressive with your tenant screening, right? You can come up with all sorts of things where if you're not being aggressive with it and you're not pushing that and you're just kind of sitting back and waiting, it's not probably going to be as good as it could be. Play to win. Don't play to lose. I think this is the key. Real estate investing, play to win. If you're playing not to lose, you're being super risk avoidant, right? And that just puts you in a place where you're always on the defense. If you're aggressively going out and making offers and being aggressive, you're going to end up winning a lot more. You might have some losses, but that's okay. The game isn't win every time. The game is win the majority of times and make the most money, even with some losses.
And sometimes it's not even the majority of times. Sometimes it's just the big ones.
Yes. Yeah. You can hit a home run and lose 4 other ones and still make a lot of money. Reading players and their hands. So I'm sure, how many of you guys have watched poker on TV at some point? And they're like, oh, that guy just twitched. He must have a big hand. He's shaking, right? What? He's just faking it. He's just faking it. Yes, exactly. Like I shake all the time when I'm putting in my chips so that people don't know what to do. They're like, what's wrong with that guy? He's just shaking. So in poker, this gets really crazy. And I just want to give you an example of the level of thinking that happens at the highest level of play of poker, kind of one level at a time. They're called levels of thinking. And as you might imagine, level 0 is basically, I'm alive. Right? Like you sat down at the poker table, you understand the basic rules of poker, and you can look at your 2 cards, and you know how to put chips in the pot. Right? So congratulations, all of you are level 0 poker players. You can go home from class and be like, I am now a professional poker player, level 0. Right? Level 1, which probably most of you can quickly get to, even if you don't know poker, is I know what I actually have. I can look at my 2 cards, I can look at the cards on the board, and I can say, I know what my 5-card best hand is. How much money do you think you win if that's what level you are?
A lot. That's how I play.
James, you're level 0, dude. Like, you don't even know what you have because you forgot to look at your cards before you said all in. Let's be real. He's like, oh, I lost the last hand. I'm all in. I haven't dealt yet, James. Slow down. So level 1 is not that hard to get to. And you know, you go to Vegas for a weekend, you can sit down as level 1 and you can walk away winning a lot of money. You can just get lucky, right? Not a big deal. Level 2, this is where things start to become super interesting. What does my opponent have? I know what I have. What does James have? And why would he be acting the way he's acting? Can I put him on a certain hand, or typically it's a range of hands. Well, he raised before the flop. He was in early position. He's not as aggressive as we've made him out to be. He's super tight. He probably has aces, kings, queens, jacks, maybe ace king, maybe ace queen. Like, I can put him on that range of hands, and then I can watch what his betting patterns are. And I can, over time, establish a picture of how James plays the game of poker. So, level 3 gets really interesting. I'm playing my hand. I'm thinking about what his hand is. And now, basically, I start thinking about what he thinks that I have. He's putting me on a range of hands. I'm putting him on a range of hands. And I'm thinking, what range does he think I have, and how would he play if he thought I had that range of hands? This is where most poker players will stop. And most of them actually really only stop about here. The really high-level players, and you have to just this is the circular thing, right? What does my opponent think that I think he has? So, it just starts going back and forth, right? And level 5 is essentially one level above that. And at some of the highest level, that's how they're thinking. They're like, well, I know what range I put him on. I think he would put me on this range, and he would act this way. So what do I think he actually is doing, and what does he think I'm doing based on that? So some super crazy kind of mind games.
Yeah, this is the Princess Bride, the guy that's like, you clearly think that I would put the poison away from me sort of guy.
No, I did not put that in here. The really weird thing here is you only ever want to think one level above your opponent. Because if you're thinking 2 or 3, they're not thinking about that, so the way they're acting doesn't have any impact on your decision. So when you're playing James, you can just play level 0. He says all in, you say call, right? Pretty much. And it's probably a coin flip at that point. Yes. So in real estate investing, it's much easier because poker's a game of incomplete information, right? Chess, a game of complete information. You can look at the board and everyone has the same information. You know where all the pieces are. Poker, you can't see all the cards, right? So in real estate, typically, you have all the information you need to analyze a property. So you can take that information. You don't necessarily have to read oh, what is this house? Does it have 2 bathrooms? Does it only have 1 bath? You don't have to do that, right? It's already written down for you, so it's really easy and obvious.
There's a little bit of that with rent.
Yes. However, when negotiating with sellers or negotiating with tenants, right, level 2 and level 3 thinking can be super useful, right? Hey, what does my opponent have? What are they willing to accept on this offer? If I was them, what do I know about their situation that gives me some information? And James and Tammy do a super job of trying to find this out. Are they already moved out of the house? Do they need the money to buy another house? Where are they at with that? If you know that information, you can start to form an aggressive play against making an offer on that house so that you can take it down and meet the seller's needs. Level 3, right? What is the seller thinking that I'm going to do? You come down and you have an inspection negotiation, and you're like, hey, it needs a new roof. What are they thinking you're going to do if they say no? They think you're going to walk? They probably have a different response than, well, we've got 5 backup offers. Go ahead and walk, right? So, anything you want to add?
No, just I did want to make the comment that sometimes we do have incomplete information in the terms of exact rents. I think sometimes we can say rents are probably going to be this, but sometimes it's a brand new neighborhood.
Why don't you comment on that?
Okay. Just going to turn off the mic and use the facilities. So yeah, sometimes we're going to go buy a property in a brand new neighborhood and we don't know what rent comps are in that neighborhood. So we know what properties around there might have gone for, what 3-bedroom properties in the past might have been, but a lot of times we don't know exactly what rent is. Even on properties in established neighborhoods, sometimes the rent comps we have are incomplete. They're year-old or 2-year-old properties or 2-year-old rent comps that somebody who was not really pushing the envelope of rents were trying to get. So a lot of times we don't have complete information as far as rents, and a lot of times we don't have complete information as far as the seller situation when we're making offers as a buyer. And that's one of the rules that real estate agents do, is they tend to act as a buffer so that you're not dealing directly with a seller and can't ask them very pointy questions about their situation and what they're going to do. It's hard to get that information when you're going from one real estate agent to another, and that's an advantage of being a seller that hires an agent to do that. So that's all I have to say about that. and this isn't my class, so I'm not sure where he's going next. Any questions? Can I repeat it? The rent thing? Yeah. So a lot of times we don't know. We usually can get, the insurance information. We could usually get tax information, although, taxes sometimes are delayed. They're a year old or 2 years old, and finding out what the assessment's going to be, you can look that up and kind of guess what the taxes are, but a lot of times we don't know the exact number for that. But rent usually is the big question mark as far as the unknown we have when making offers, which if you've actually done any deal analysis, changing your rents even by $25 can have a pretty significant impact on your cash-on-cash return, which is the primary metric that we most of the time use for analyzing properties. So it can make a huge difference as to whether or not you're getting $25 or even $50 more or less in rent per month. So, and that's how Brian decided to get involved in real estate investing.
Learn anything? I did. So, quick class exercise. I meant to take the word quick out of this. Class exercise. So I really want you guys to think about these and answer what you'd honestly do, not based on how many other people are raising their hands. Because you might learn something about yourself doing this exercise. And we've done something similar in class before. I'm not sure why it was some other risk tolerance class, right? So the bet we're going to make is I have a coin in my pocket, and we're going to pull it out. It's an evenly balanced coin. There's not the 50.1 because the head weighs more, whatever like that. It's perfectly two-sided coin. If you flipped it an infinite number of times, it would come up 50-50. So that's the setup. So would you make the following bet against me? You bet $1, I bet $1. We flip the coin one time. How many of you would take that bet right now with me? Perfect. Get your dollars out. So why would you take that bet? Because it's not much money. Anyone else? Huh? It's 50-50. Anyone else? Because it's fun. These are good reasons. So we've got not a lot of money, it's fun, and it's 50-50. Anybody else? How about the people that aren't willing to take that bet? Why not? No long-term gain. So it's only $1. That's why you won't do it. But you're sitting here already. You could have.
You're wasting my time is what the response was.
Perfect. You stick around, sir. How much money? Can you see how much money's in my wallet?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you find a coin? Paul's gonna lose some money tonight. Find the two-headed coin. So, agreed. It's flipping one time. All right. So if we flip it 100 times, right? Same bet each time. How many of you are willing to take that? Okay. Why? Why are you willing to take that bet? What are you expecting to happen?
It's fun.
It's fun. Okay. Okay. So you want to sit around with me and flip a coin 100 times to basically come out even. She wants to be entertained. She's like, normally I sit over here. If Brian flips a coin with me 100 times, it's more entertaining than normal. Fair enough. So I look at that bet and I go, hey, if it's a one-time thing and somebody says, you want to flip a coin or $1? Sure, why not, right? Am I going to do it 100 times? No, because what do I expect to come out with? The same as I started with, right? All right, fair enough. So how about your $10? You're going to bet $10 against the flip. I will put $11 in. We're going to flip it one time. If you raise your hand, I might pull $11 out. You might have to pull $10 out, and we might flip a coin. So, I'm just kidding. You don't really have to do that. But would you take that bet? One flip. Yeah. No. Why would you not take this bet?
Just because you're starting to get the chance against real money.
Okay.
You don't have control over that.
So you will feel a little bit of pain if you lose $10. Be like, man, I don't get my coffee for the next 3 days or whatever the $10, whatever you're going to do with it, right?
The odds are still even. It's not lean towards me.
But I'm putting $11 in. You're only going to put 10 in. So if you win, you get 21. If I win, well, he's going to get his 10 back, right? He gets an extra $1, right? Essentially from the even bet. So you wouldn't take it. Who would take this bet? Flipping it one time. Okay? James, why would you take this bet?
It's fun.
Okay, fantastic. Anyone that doesn't think it's... Yes. I'm not sure. Someone take the mic from James. He's a maniac in terms of loose, aggressive play. He's going to say yes to all of these.
Depends how
So,
high we go.
What about 100 times? How many of you are willing to take that bet 100 times? Why are you willing to take it now?
wait, hold on a second.
Didn't want to waste $10. Now he's like, heck yeah.
Because now statistically, you're going to end up winning about $100. Yeah.
Well, technically you're going to win about 50, right?
Oh, yeah.
You're going to win $1 extra half the time.
Exactly.
So statistically, okay, hang on to that statistically thought. We're going to talk about that in a couple slides. It might actually be the next slide. So why is 100 times? You could also come out, you could lose 60-40, right, in that 100. But you weren't willing to do it one time. Okay, that's interesting to me.
Yep.
Anybody else have thoughts on this bet? Are you willing to flip 100 times for that? James.
Wait.
Oh,
If I only win 41 or whatever it is times, I break even. Because if I win, if I win 40 something times, I get $50 back.
Yep. So you don't even have to win 50-50 to actually make your money. All right. How about betting $10 against my 20? We're going to flip it one time. How many of you want to take that bet? How many of you don't want to take that bet? You got to pick. This is a class exercise. How many don't want to take that bet? Why? Somebody that has their hand in the air, why do you not want to take that bet? You're going to bet $10 and I'm going to bet 20 against your 10. We're going to flip a coin once. You win, you get my 20. I win, I only get your 10.
Who wants to say something? Oh.
Dan. Mike's
Wait, let me
coming.
get Mike.
Because invariably it doesn't go in my favor.
Bad luck. Okay. I don't know what to say to that one. But it's an even coin, right? So how about 100 times? How many of you are willing to take that bet if we flip it 100 times? How many of you are not willing to take this bet? All the people who didn't raise their hands the first time? Is anyone not willing to take that bet? Please raise your hands. You're not willing to take it.
I hate gambling. I always lose, and so it's based on previous history.
Okay. So you're one of the very few people that I've ever heard say that they consistently lose. My mom goes to the casino and she takes her $5 or $10 and puts it in the slot machine, and she actually says, I always lose, but Ed always wins, right? And I'm like, which is my stepdad. And I'm like, do you write it down? Do you track it? No, right? Chances are high they're both losing, right? It just seems like they remember the wins and they forget the losses, which is very common. So in my opinion, that's emotion, right? You're letting emotion play into your decision. Would you walk into a rental house and go, the pink bathroom, I don't like this, I'm not going to buy it, right? It's very similar. So honestly, it is my hope that everyone in this class would take this bet hands down without a second thought every single time and eliminate the emotion. You stand to win so much in this bet, and it's very easy. And in poker, right, this is a waste of time, right? Because we're going to end up even over the long haul. I'm taking this bet. You want to flip once, you want to flip a million times, you want to, however many times you want to flip, I accept, right? You're going to give me 11 for my 10. I have got basically money that's going to come to me over time. Like, that should be an easy bet. And that's what the rest of the class is kind of be based around. James.
So where's the threshold for you? Is it $10 to $10 and a penny, or is it what?
The next line. So, I went higher, right? In case someone was like, yeah, that's easy, right?
Oh,
so,
20K.
Yeah. So assuming you had 10K and assuming I had 20K, right? Would you bet 10K against my 20K for one flip? Why not?
Oh wait, I want to hear Tammy's response because we actually had this discussion
wait for
very
the mic.
recently.
It's one flip, and the odds are 50% chance I'm going to lose 10K. So no.
Right. So that's risk avoidance, and if this is the thing, if you don't take anything else away from other than the other thing I said, if you don't take anything else away, this is the thing to take away. If you're not willing to make this bet in life, you will come out far shorter in the long run than you would if you're willing to take that bet every time. It doesn't matter if you lose it this time. It matters that you made the bet, and we're going to talk about why, and that's called expected value, right? You're betting 10K against my 20. It doesn't matter if we're flipping once or 10 times or 100 times, even if it's 10K versus 11K, just like $10 versus 11, right? Making that bet is important to your long-term success.
So where is your cutoff? Would you do 10K versus $10,001?
Depends on how many. For me, let me get to that.
Yeah, because that's kind of the interesting point for me is where does the crossover happen where it becomes a no-brainer versus where it becomes, I really need to think about that, or definitely not.
Right. So let me get to the expected value part so we can talk about it.
Okay.
This is the other kicker, right? If all you had was 10K, if Tammy's all she has is 10K, right? And I'm like, hey, do you want to do this? Like, and she's like, that's all my money, right? She should be like, can we do 100 for $200 or something else? She should try and lower the stakes and still make the bet. But you don't want to put all of your net worth, just like you wouldn't want to put all of your net worth or all of your available cash into any one single deal most of the time. I've come very close to doing that, and it's been very tight for a while. But that's not the goal, right? That's not what we're saying. So
yeah, I actually want to clarify what you said, because I think people could misinterpret,
Sure.
especially if they're listening on the recording. So you're not saying you put all of your net worth in a deal. You're saying you're putting all of your liquid net worth in a deal.
I'm saying you shouldn't. It's not a good plan to do that.
Right, but the comment you made is you did this. And
Yes.
And you felt tight.
I put all of the majority of my liquid net worth.
Right, but there was
into-
other resources
Yes.
that were.
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify that so that someone didn't misinterpret it later.
Yes, agreed. So have some introspection about this as we go through the rest of class, because I think it's super important. And it's the ability to not be emotionally based. When we went around the room for introductions, a lot of the risk is like my gut, and your gut definitely plays a role. James and I have driven up to an apartment building, and we just both went, nope.
Didn't even get in the car.
We didn't even get out of the car, and I owned something on the same street already, right? It was like 4 doors down. We pulled up, and it was like, like there was just all sorts of stuff. So there's Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, right, which talks about your gut, but it's not a emotional decision. Your brain is actually compiling information that you are not compiling and giving you that thought. So it's not necessarily emotion as much as it is your brain is doing overtime work for you. So risk versus reward. Gambling games are obviously about risk versus reward, much like betting 10K against 20K, much like real estate investing. So you should only take the risk if the reward is worth it. And this is James's question. Would you do this if it was $10,000 versus $10,001? If we're going to flip an infinite amount of times, yes, because I'm going to make money, right? If we're going to flip once, no, it's probably really not worth it because it's basically an even shot for me. Like the $1 doesn't have any impact. Another way of saying this is if you've ever gone, how many of you guys have been to Vegas? How many of you guys have ever gambled on anything in Vegas? Perfect. So did you take enough where you ever made a bet where you were like, ooh, and you lost, and you're like, that kind of stings a little. Like you're playing $5 blackjack and you get up like $200 and you're like, I'm going to take a shot with $50. And then you lose that $50, you're like, oh, that stung. Like that sucked, right? So in poker, if you're playing with money that doesn't sting, and this is part of why James in the poker games that we play is such a loose, aggressive player, he doesn't care if he loses the $10, right? If it was $1,000, he would play totally differently, right? And so you have to hit a threshold where that reward actually means something, or what you would lose actually would sting a little bit before you take the right choices. So you've got to have a reward. There's 2 types of risk and reward. There's immediate, which I'm sure you can imagine what that looks like. What do you have to risk right now to get the immediate reward, right? What is this like? Money required to purchase a house in exchange for the cash flow you're going to get. I have to spend $60,000, and I'm going to get cash flow starting tomorrow when I buy the house that is $300 a month. So that's immediate risk. What's potential risk, right? This one's much trickier, right? You have to look ahead and basically anticipate, hey, what's going to happen and how am I going to handle that? And then somehow choose the best play to get the outcome that you want. Example here, will buying a certain property get you to your cash flow goal or get you to the wealth goal that you have, right? How do you know that? You don't know what the future holds, right? You have to actually kind of predict it and try and figure it out. One difference from poker is that your largest potential risk in poker is the money you have sitting in front of you on the table. It's called no limit poker, but in truth it should be called stack limit poker because it's only what's in front of you. True no limit would be, I bet $100,000 and James only has 20 on the table. He would have to go to his wallet in order to call my $100,000 bet. That's not how poker works anymore. In the old days, it did, and so people that had a lot more money could essentially be like, hey, Paul, I'm going to bet my car and my house, and Paul's like, well, I don't have the money. He would have to fold, right? That's a really tough way to play poker.
You'd buy the pot.
Yep. So in real estate, your risk can actually be much more than just your stack size on a poker table, right? It could be everything you own, right? You go buy a property that you weren't prepared for, can't handle, and now everything starts to unravel. It affects everything else in your life, even down to personal relationships. I better speed up. This is a 3-hour class. Did you put that on the invite? Okay. So odds, coin flip. What are the odds of winning? 50-50. What does that look like? It's 1-to-1, right? You have one on one side, you win. On the other side, you lose one, right? So you're going to win one to lose one. If you bet $10 on that coin flip against my $20, what are your odds of winning that money? Still 1-to-1. What are the odds you're being offered by me? Yes. So you're getting 2-to-1 on a 1-to-1 bet. So this is basically, if you go back to that class exercise we did, anytime the odds you're being given are greater than the odds of the actual outcome, you should probably take the bet from a straight odds standpoint, right? You want to make bets that are like this. This is getting the best of it, right? When you have the worst of it, you're putting in the $20 and the other person's putting in 10 and you're flipping a coin, right? That's me in all those circumstances. I'm getting the worst of it. So here's another example, a little bit more complicated. I'm going to write a number or tell James a number from 1 to 5. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And then whoever I pick is going to guess the number. You're going to bet $20. If you guess the right number, I'll give you $100. How many of you would take this bet? Nobody. How many of you wouldn't take this bet? How many of you are still calculating the odds in your head? Right. So what are the odds of the game versus the odds of you actually winning? What are you being offered versus the game? Right? The game odds are 4-to-1. You're going to guess 1 out of 5 numbers. 4 times you're going to miss. 1 time you're going to hit. However, you're betting $20 to 100. Out of 120, right? That reduces to 5-to-1. So you're being offered 5-to-1 on a 4-to-1 bet. You should want to take that bet every time. Your long-term outcome is positive. James, why would you take that bet other than it's fun?
That was the only reason I was going to take it.
Damn it.
Back to man.
All right, James. It's you bet 200 and I'll give you 1,000. Will you take that bet?
I probably would take that one.
Why?
Because it was fun.
All right.
But
How
I think
about-
actually that is actually probably my limit, right about there.
Okay.
That's my comfort.
So if we go to 2,000 and 10,000,
No, it's not going to happen.
you're out?
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know. I just don't think that I'm willing to risk $2,000 to do that. I could do other things with the 2,000. I feel more certain I'm going to get better results from.
Okay, fair enough. What if we let you do it 30 times?
Again, I think I would rather use that chunk to buy another house.
Okay, fair enough. So this is a quote. I'm going to forget who it's from. It's been so long. It's one of the owners of one of the casinos in Old Vegas. But basically having even 1/1000% the worst of it, the richest man will still go broke if they gamble long enough, right? This is how Vegas was built, right? This is why the lights are so bright and there are so many of them, is that most of the time you have much more of a disadvantage than 1/1000%. You have a 2% or a 3% or even in some cases 15% disadvantage. Yet you're still standing there blissfully being happy, right? Because it's fun, right? Yep. And they give you free drinks. So if you just pretend you're paying for your drinks with the money you're losing, you might feel better. Well, not if you're playing. They're $1. Tip the waitress and they're free. So if you have an edge, if you ever are in a situation, I should probably turn the mic off for this one too. If you ever have a situation where you get an edge against the house in Vegas, take full advantage. This is like if they offered you, 60 to 40 odds and you had the 60% in blackjack, you should take it and you should put as much money down as you possibly can to take advantage. And this situation actually happened to me. There's a game called Switch Blackjack. How many of you have ever played it? So my friends would come to town when I lived in Vegas, and there were 4 of us. 5 people considered a Switch Blackjack table. How many of you know how to play blackjack? So it's blackjack. You're trying to get to 21. They deal you 2 sets of cards. You have a bet on each hand. And then if you want, you can switch the top 2 cards. So you can change your hand, which gives the player a huge advantage, right? If you get dealt something like an ace and a 5 and a king and a 5, you get to switch these and end up with 5-5 and ace-king. I know you can't read my writing, but that's a huge advantage. I just took 2 mediocre hands and made them beautiful in blackjack. So the casino obviously isn't going to give you an advantage, so they change the game such that if you get 22, or if the dealer gets 22, they don't bust. It's a push. You don't win, they don't win, everybody just takes their money back. However, when this game came out, there were only 1 table of this game in most casinos. Blackjack dealers have been trained to deal blackjack forever. They would come to this table, they would just come from a blackjack table where they're busting on 22, and they would play, and they would say, oh, 22, bust, and they would pay out. At this point, you probably have about a 60% advantage on the table. 4 of my friends were sitting at the table, and we stacked up, and within a matter of an hour and a half, walked away with at least $10,000 of the casino's money, right? And it was like, how much can we earn before they catch on? And then some guy sat down, and this is probably the right thing to do, I don't know. It's the casino.
He goes, you didn't bust, you have 22.
Yeah, he sits down, sees it, he's not even playing, he's just watching, he goes, you have 22, that's a push, and we're all like, oh, you're killing us. Like, I'll give you $1,000 to just walk away from the table without saying that. So take what you will from that, but the casino definitely has an advantage, and you can see how fast their money adds up, right? In a matter of an hour and a half, our stacks were just growing. It was crazy. So they eventually caught on. They didn't kick us out. They just kind of, we made a mistake, nothing you can do, and then we all left. So we want to make the bets when the odds are in our favor. On occasion, it might be profitable to make a bet where the odds are not in your favor. When might that be?
When you're bluffing.
Okay, the odds are probably still in your favor, expected value-wise, if you're bluffing. There are a lot of times where you would like to make a play that is a much smaller value in poker and prove to your opponent that you are dumb, so that later they will continue to think you're dumb and you will win a lot of money from them. So you are willing to set that up in many cases. So pot odds. This is the odds that the pot is giving you for calling a bet. Example, there's $80 in the pot, and the opponent, James, bets $20 to me. You're getting 5-1 to call. There's now $100 in the pot, and I would have to call 20 in order to get it. So if my chances are better to win than 5-1, just like we talked about, I should call. This is the easy example. A lot of times in poker, it's not that straightforward because there are more cards to come, and you're probably going to face more bets. So you can think about that in real estate like, I'm buying this property, but I'm going to have to do some capital expenditure stuff later. And I'm going to need to do upgrades later. However, I want to just apply this to upgrading a unit during turnover. So optional items, right? They're not mandatory. It's not life and safety. Say it's going to cost you $4,000 to do the work. You estimate that in the next 3 years, you're going to get another $8,000 in rent. Doing this, doing that fix is basically laying you 8,000 to 4,000 odds, or 2-to-1 odds. Should you make that fix or those upgrades? Why? How do you know? Because you like 2-to-1. Okay? So in order for me to answer that question, right, if I believe that I will get that rent and things will work out that way at least once out of every 3 times, then I should do that. Right? Or 2 out of every 3 times, sorry. It technically is 1 to 2 if I wrote odds as if it was being laid to me. So there's a better way to evaluate this, which we'll talk about in a few slides. But that's kind of, pot odds is a huge concept in poker. It'd be crazy to leave it out.
I had a question about pot odds. So are
Sure.
you evaluating each individual round separately, or are you taking into account odds at future betting rounds?
Please hold that question for the next slide.
Okay.
Right? And it's his last point too, right? Another thing you have to look at is whether this is going to cost more in the future, similar to future bets. So implied odds. So this is what James is essentially talking about is in pot odds, if we talk about just there's $80 in the pot, James bets 20, I have to call 20. It's a simple decision if that's the last round of betting. If there's 2 rounds of betting still to come, and he's going to bet 200 next time and then likely 500 on the end, I have to take that into account. So implied odds actually handles this, and we're going to talk about it in a slightly different way. But a lot of times, you might want to make a play that is incorrect with the current pot odds in order to get a huge payoff later. Right? So what does this look like?
Bear trap.
Bear trap. Yes. If you ever play poker with James, he'll do this thing where he goes, bear trap. I'm setting the bear trap. Usually he doesn't have anything in his hand. How many of you seen Rounders? And the guy eating the Oreo cookie, Teddy KGB, it's like that when he had the bear trap. It's like, yes. So if James has what I think he's playing the nit roll, I think he's got aces or kings or queens, and I show up with pocket 5s or pocket 3s pre-flop, I might call a raise without proper odds because I'm about 8 to 1 to flop a set. So I'll flop another 5 if I have a pair of 5s where I would beat him. I'm about 8 to 1. He may only be offering me 2 to 1 odds to call his pre-flop raise. However, if he has enough money behind him, I'm willing to call that because if I hit, he's probably going to give me the rest of his money. Right? He's probably going to get it in because he still thinks he has the best hand. Particularly against a very specific grumpy old man in the Bellagio. James wanted me to interject fun poker stories to not bore you with math. So there was a guy in the Bellagio. You can call the floor and ask for a time clock if someone's taking too long to make a decision. So I was in a hand with someone else, didn't involve this person, and he had bet. He raised, I re-raised pre-flop, he re-raised, I called. The flop came, it was all low cards. I had kings, I was pretty sure he had aces, which is hard to lay down. Normally you're going to lose your stack in that situation, especially when the board is like 10, 7, 3. So he bets on the flop. I took a couple minutes to think about it, watch his actions. I end up calling. He bets a bigger bet on the turn. I take a couple minutes. You can tell this grumpy old man at the end of the table is getting really impatient. He just wants the next hand. Clearly out-of-towner, just there, he's trying to play as much poker as possible in his weekend. River comes, the guy bets. I take about 2 minutes, and he finally can't take it anymore, and he calls for the floor. And I'm like, you're not even in the hand. What are you doing? And he gets really grumpy. The floor comes over. They actually call a clock on me, which was actually totally incorrect by the floor, but you can't control it. Floor's decisions are final, which sucks. But he calls the clock, so I just sit there and I wait till there's 3 seconds left, and I fold. He shows me aces. I laid down my kings. So I made the right play. But I had some words with the guy. I'm like, you're not in the hand. I was pretty angry, more angry than I am now. And so I waited, and he stayed at the table. And I chose to use that situation basically to kind of improve my chances when I finally played a hand with him. About a half an hour later, I got dealt pocket 5s. He raised. I called. We were the only 2 in the hand. The flop came like 7, 5, 10. I was pretty sure he had a big pair. He bet out, I don't know, $70. He probably had 600 behind him left in his stack. And I just looked at him as angry as possible, and I was like, I'm all in. Like, take that, right? He just kind of looked at me because I had flopped a set. I knew I had him beat, but he couldn't let it go because he thought I was just pissed off. And so he made the call, and he got stacked. He lost all of his money. And then he's miserable, right? Which, in poker, you never, ever want to try and get revenge because you are going to lose your money if you're trying to get revenge. This just happened to work itself out really, really beautifully. And so for the next 2 hours, he was very quiet, didn't say anything, bought in a couple more times, gave some other people at the table money, and then left. And that's really, right? And this is why poker is this weird, odd game, because in one sense, you're taking money from people who, in some cases, can't afford it, right? But it's this weird dichotomy. If I tell them that, they get up and they go to a different table, and then I don't earn a living. And so there's this weird, like, are you contributing to society thing that I actually fought a lot about in my own head when I was playing poker. So I definitely couldn't have done it for a long period of time. So the implied odds is basically knowing, hey, if I flop my set, I can get your whole stack. And so I have better odds than it would appear because you're going to put in more money later. So this is essentially the ratio of what we talked about earlier, potential reward to immediate risk, right? My potential reward is the entire stack. The immediate risk is just this $20 up front. Why are you laughing?
This is why I play every hand, because my potential reward is infinite.
Not even close.
In my brain.
We're going to take a trip to Vegas, and we're going to videotape the whole thing, and that'll be an NCREG class. Like, James and Brian go to Vegas. What happens? So there's two comparisons here to real estate investing, right? The first is delayed gratification, right? You can take some risk now to earn a lot more later, right? Real estate's very long term. If you invest in something now and it's not working, wait a while, it'll probably work itself out. The other one is speculation, right? If you're just constantly doing what James is doing, thinking as an infinite return by playing every hand, you're speculating and it's not correct, right? You shouldn't be doing this, and this isn't us saying, oh, everything in Iowa is going to go up by 100%, so I'm going to go buy all the real estate I can there, and that's the only reason you're buying it. It's a negative cash flow, they're not good properties, but you think appreciation is going to take care of itself. We don't want to do that. Those are not implied odds. Those are actually what we call reverse implied odds, where this is one of the funniest things in poker, where you have a weak hand and you're faced with a bet. Sorry, it's not the definition. Reverse implied odds is basically you have what you think is a good hand, but you actually have a really weak hand, right? And so here's an example of that. Basically, you've got a weak hand and someone bets into you. The problem here is if your opponent doesn't have anything and they're just bluffing, they probably aren't going to put the rest of their stack in later. So you're not winning what you think you're going to win by calling. However, if they do have it, you're probably going to lose. So you can't win more from them, so there's no implied odds. And you can either win the minimum, they back off and you win the small pot, or you lose the maximum by going the full distance and losing because they had a better hand anyway. So very difficult, and this is not what we're aiming to do. Here's the 4 signs of reverse implied odds. You're not sure where you're at, and you have little chance of improving. Okay? In real estate, those are 2 really bad things, right? If you're buying a property that's, I don't know, in Indianapolis that costs $50,000, and it's going to be worth $50,000 10 years from now, you don't really have a chance of improving, right? Calling commits you to future bets. Once you've bought that property, it's not like you can be like undo, right? You can't fold and get your money back. You've committed. So whatever you're going to have to do, you're going to have to do a rehab in order to sell it. It's going to cost you money. That's the correlation, right? Your opponent can back off at any time, right? Oh, the appreciation was going up, and then the market changed. The market may be your opponent in this case. So you're essentially overestimating your true odds, and this is basically what I just talked about, right? The CapEx Silent Killer class, if you haven't seen it, I talk all about this. This is really what this correlates to really well in my mind, is buying properties that you think on paper look amazing, but they're actually not for many reasons. The number one reason is the CapEx will just kill it. We already talked about those. James.
So how do you evaluate the CapEx part of it? Are you looking for properties that are newer? Are you looking for properties that don't look like they're going to have maintenance? How do you evaluate that?
That's like a whole 2-hour class.
Okay, we'll cover it.
You want me to
another time.
teach that now?
No, I wanted to know if you had a quick answer for it.
I mean, the quick answer is understand whether or not that property is appreciating at all in value, and understand if it's not, probably CapEx is going to kill you, right? I mean, that's essentially what the class is if your property is steadily appreciating and it's been worth less, and in 10 years ago, now it's worth more, and you look back 10 years further and it's still worth more, that's probably an okay place.
So this is an example of where, like, I come to a class that I could have taught, not this example, but you saying something that I never thought I understood the way you just said it, and that is, so are you saying that appreciation offsets capital expenses?
No.
Okay. Because it almost seemed like that's what you were implying.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You're asking me to teach a 2-hour class.
Right. You don't
10
have to
seconds.
right now.
So yeah. So another example of this is just being like, oh, yeah, I'm a collector of properties, right? My player type is loose aggressive, and I just went and bought this house. I didn't do the proper analysis, right? Your reverse implied odds are probably very poor. All right, this is what James has been waiting for all night. Mathematical expectation, also known as EV. So this is really the decision-making tool that I hope you guys can take away from the class and utilize. This is basically the amount a bet will average winning or losing. So when we did the coin flipping, this really applies here, and this is how you can see whether or not you should take the bet. So this is really summing all the possible values for any variable, each multiplied by its possibility of occurrence. So 50% of the time when you bet $1, you're going to win, right? And 50%, when I bet the $2, you're going to win $1 from me. Really, you're only winning 50 cents on the other side, right? Because it's the probability 50% times $1 is 50 cents versus 50% of the time you're going to win $1. So if we add those together, right, you're essentially going to lose 50 cents half the time, and you're going to win $1 half the time. Does that make sense? That calculation for the coin flip? I don't hear any yeses. So half the time, right, if you're betting $1 and I'm putting in $2, half the time I'm going to win. You're going to lose $1. So 0.5, which is 50%, times that $1 is 50 cents, right? The other side of this is 0.5 times $2, which is $1, and you're going to win this one and you're going to lose this one. So $1 plus negative 50 cents gives you a total expected value of 50 cents every time you make that bet. So every time you make this bet, you're essentially earning 50 cents whether or not you win. And that's the key. It's whether or not you win. Your expected value was getting 50 cents. So if this is really, $1,000 and $2,000, your expected value is $500 just by making the bet. And once you come to terms with that, it becomes much easier to just say, hey, this bet has an expected value of $400. I'm willing to make it, even if I lose. So it doesn't matter if you lose. If you take bets throughout your life that have a positive expected value, you will come out ahead. Does that make sense? Because that is the key, right? And that's where emotion gets in the way, and we'll talk about that. This is really the heart of every gambling decision you're ever going to make if you ever gamble. I already said that. We talked about a time where you might want to make a negative EV bet, right? You're setting up another player. But there are also times where James thinks he has the best of a situation, and he's like, I bet you can't make 5 free throws in a row. And I'm like, well, I've been practicing in my spare time, and he doesn't know that, so I actually have the best of it. He may think he's offering me something where he has the best of it, and so there's a weird situation in there. The problem is, most people think in a negative EV way. And this is all of us, right? We want to avoid risk. And so a lot of you, when you answered the question, would you make $100 versus my $200 bet one time? No, because you don't want to potentially lose $100. That's risk avoidance. So think about that, how it applies to your life, especially in the EV way. Because if you're just worried about losing, it becomes very difficult to win in a more substantial way. You will end up further behind in the long run. I'll show you an example graph at the very end. Most of us were brought up this way. I was brought up this way. I mean, poker definitely helped change that because you're pushing edges of 51% against 49%, right? And you're making estimations based on what other people's hands are. So most people go say, hey, mom, coworker, friend, I'm going to invest in real estate. Should I buy this house? What are the answers we get?
Horrible tenants.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right? They're not founded in logic. They didn't come to NCRAG and they didn't learn about real estate investing. They don't know what the returns are. And when you tell them they're 30%, they're like, that's crap. You can't get 30%, right? They don't know. They didn't come and learn. So this is essentially avoiding variance. They don't want to have James's life, right? They don't want to have the really high and then really low and then really high and then really low when he's playing poker.
Then have to buy in again.
Right. He likes to buy in a lot. So here's an actual example of my variance. This orange line or yellow line, whatever it looks like to you guys, down here is expected value. So all the online hands are tracked. You can put them in a database and pump out lots of stats and graphs. My green line is my actual winnings. So this is across about 70, I can't really read it, 7389. So like 7,400 hands of poker online, which is like 4 hours. Yeah. So this line shows you what I should have won. This is my expected value based on the cards I had, the cards my opponent had, and when things got all in. This is what I actually won. So what does that tell you? Was this a lucky day or an unlucky day for me? This is a lucky day, right? Today, my luck, my variance, ran better than what I should have made. So, what does this look like? This is my expected value, and this is what I earned, right?
Looks like you should have quit after the first hour.
Right. I should have quit the day before. But this is variance, and this is a single day. And what's really important to understand here is that in poker, and in lots of things, the variance is going to come and go. And so if you look at this one day, you might go, man, you just run really bad, right? You have terrible luck.
Yeah, you can't make a living doing this.
Yeah, you lost a lot of money, but without knowing what your expected value was, I still obviously was not making the best decisions this day because I was still down $200 at the end of that hand. But the previous slide, I was basically break even, right? Which sucks because playing break even poker is like flipping that coin $1 for $1 infinite amount of times. That's not the point. But those days happen. You're going to have really good days and really bad days, but time evens this out. And so if you make consistently good bets that have a positive expected value across your life, you will come out ahead. Some more on variance. When you make a good play, and we talked about this already, even if you lose, you should still be happy you made the play. You'll see people at a poker table get mad, they make a play, it was the right play, they lost the hand because of the luck component, right? But then they're like, oh, and they're unhappy. It's like, you should be ecstatic. You should be like, I made the best play. I made the same play. If I could have seen your cards, I would have made the exact same play.
It happens 10 more times, I'm going to do exactly the same way.
That's how you make your money, right? It's like, if I'm offering you $20 to your $10 bet on the flip of a coin, if we continue to flip that coin, you're going to be rich every single time. So this is a different way to think. It's not the way we're brought up. And in this case, a less good player would have lost more or earned less in that same situation. So you guys come into class, you basically are increasing your knowledge, you're going out and you're investing in real estate. This is going to help you earn more than a less experienced investor. You're going to lose less if you have something go wrong than a less experienced investor. Those are the bets you want to be making. The mental game is huge here as well. Just a word on that. If you start playing like that bad day I showed you where I'm playing really well, but my EV is just level, but I'm losing and losing and losing and losing, those suck because then you go, well, am I a winning player? Should I change the way I play? And then you change the way you play to make less positive expected value decisions. And then guess what happens? You lose more. And then you're like, crap. And then you change again and you change again, and you've lost your basic strategy. So when you're investing in real estate, have your long-term strategy really understood. Where do you want to go? Why do you want to go there? And stick with it. This applies in real estate. I think experience and grit matters. I'm going to not focus on that because we did a whole interview on that. And if you go on tilt, you'll do even worse, right? Going on tilt is the grumpy old guy. He was like, he's still mad at me. He thinks I'm mad at him. He's like, whatever. And he loses his stack because of it. Very common in poker. You'll see someone lose a big hand, and literally the very next hand, they will lose the rest of their stack. It's super common, which is awesome if you're not them. And here's the really hard part, especially as it applies to real estate investing. You might actually be a winning poker player and go and play in Vegas for 3 months and lose a lot of money just due to variance. Now, translate that to real estate investing. You go buy a house, you have a really crappy first tenant, a bad second tenant, a water leak. You're like, this sucks. It's not for me. I'm losing money. And you choose to never invest again because of that. Is that the right decision? Probably not. How many times have you heard somebody tell a story like that, though? I had a house once. It was I lived in it, and then I moved out. Then we rented it. It was just crappy. Had to fix toilets at 2 in the morning. Yeah, who cares? So, poker EV example. I raise pre-flop and I get one caller. $100 in the pot. I have nothing left. I have nothing after the flop. So the flop, I don't have a pair. I don't have anything. My opponent checks to me. What do you do and why? For those of you that know poker.
Or even what you're talking about.
Huh?
Or even what you're talking about.
Yes. So, yeah. So I'm going to bet $50 in this scenario, but I don't have anything. And that's most people's response. Amateur poker players, why would you bet there? You don't have anything. Well, let's take a look. If I think my opponent is going to fold more than a third of the time, I'm betting $50 into a $100 pot, right? If I think he's going to fold, I should make that play because I will have a positive expected value. They always think, amateurs are like, what if he calls my bluff? What if he has something? Who cares? The math shows that this is a positive expected value play. So this is the risk avoidance that you hear in your head talking. These questions are irrelevant to whether or not you should make the play. And so investing in real estate, the same thing applies. It's not about, hey, what if I lose money? It's about, if I invest this amount of money, this is my expected return, my expected value calculation, and you can calculate it, and I'll show you how here in a second, to basically show, hey, I think 20% of the time I'm going to lose money. Great, calculate that in. See if it's still a positive expected value. So, based on the player in the situation, if you feel he'd fold more than a third of the time, it's correct to make that bet. Here's the math. We're going to estimate that he's going to actually fold 40% of the time, and you'd lose the other 60%, which actually isn't true. We're making it worse than it actually is. So, 60% of the time you lose 50, and 40% of the time you'd win 100. What does that look like? Multiply it out, an expected value of $10. So every time I make this play, I am basically earning $10, right? We took 60% times the 50, because that's what we're going to lose. That makes negative 30. We took 40% times the 100. That makes 40. We add those together. It's $10. No question, James?
No questions.
So I already said that. Over time, this is where really good poker players make a living. It's not, ooh, I had aces and you had kings and we got all in pre-flop. That's not where you make your living. You make your living in this type of bets. Any questions on that? You're all like, all right, apply it to real estate again. And this is also what most people think at the poker table is just luck. They look at that and they go, man, he's getting good cards. He just keeps betting. But really, it's not. It's just that you know the math. So how do you make the most profitable decisions? You can tell this is a long slide too because my text is tiny. Your goal is to make the most profitable decision, not just a profitable decision. Does that sound crazy? Does that make sense? Like if you have 10 decisions and they're all profitable, do you just randomly pick one? No, that wouldn't make any sense. So many times people will just choose a play without evaluating the rest of the plays. Hey, I'm going to take this play because it's profitable. So another example from poker. You're heads up on the river and you have 10-7. So just a 10 and a 7 in your hand on a board of 9, 8, 6, 2, 5. So you essentially have the highest possible straight. You can only use 5 cards in poker. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you literally have the nuts, the best possible hand on this board. So your opponent bets into you 50. You're like, hallelujah. He thinks he has something. I'm going to make some money, right? How much should you raise? You each have $500 behind. Do you raise 50? He bets 50, so you're like, I'm going to raise to 100. Do you raise 150 or do you raise 450? What's the right play? Even if you don't know poker, what do you think? So 150, why 150? So 450 might scare him. What'd you say?
Keep the game going.
Keep the game going. You don't want to take all this money right away. You want to wait till later to get it?
You don't want to fold or call.
Okay, so these are two of the best answers because that's usually what people think, right? Hey, if I raise to 50, he's probably for sure calling, right? Because he already bet 50, the pot's worth it. He might think I'm bluffing, so I'm going to make a little money. And that's the thinking that's not correct, right? In poker, because you're going to say, let's estimate. How often is he going to call 50? We think he's probably calling the $50 raise a lot, right? He already put 50 in, it's 50 more. He's probably calling that 80% of the time. The 150, he probably calls 40% of the time. Since he bet into this board, it's likely he has a 7, right? Which gives him a straight of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So he still has a straight, which is a great hand, but he doesn't have the best straight. And you're the only hand that could beat him. So in that case, he's definitely calling this. How many times is he calling the 450? Probably about half the time that he would call, because he has a 7, about half the time that he would call this. So we're going to call that 20%. So 20% of the time he's going to call $450. If we do the math on this, which bet should you make? 450. Are you going to make money every single hand from him? No. But your expected value of this bet is $90. And this is the analysis that most people won't do. In poker, in real estate, they won't look at it and go, what are the other options? Is there a better option? So take that to heart when you're doing it, because even though you only get his $450 20% of the time, it doesn't matter. You make more money by making that play. So I have a bunch of examples for expected value. I'm going to kind of fly through them. And this is really the last section of the presentation because James is looking at the clock. I know he's nervous. So let's say you could buy an online store. If you want to buy an Amazon business that's already set up and running, you're going to make $2,000 a month, and you have to buy the store for $15,000. How many of you buy this business? Assuming you want to buy an online business, right? So why do you buy it?
It's a good return.
It's a good return, okay? Do you do it? So after some quick research, you estimate that 50% of the time, you'll actually make the $2K a month in year one. What if you lose your $15,000 investment the other half of the time? Do you still buy it? If you knew those were to be true, should you still buy this? Austin is shaking his head. Is it? So the EV, half the time, 50% times the 24K, which is what we'd make, plus 50% times the negative 15K, gives us a positive expected value of $4,500. You should take this bet every time. By making this bet, whether you win or lose, you've earned yourself $4,500. And you're like, but I didn't earn it if I lost my money, Brian. But over time, if you make the bets that are positive expected value, you will actually earn that money. How many of you believe that? I know I'm standing here telling you. Does that make sense? It's hard to apply in life. I'm not saying it's not, because there's emotion and there's risk and other stuff. James.
How do you take into account that you might not have another $24,000, or I'm sorry, another $15,000 to invest to do that? How do you?
That's the same thing. You never want to be putting all of your eggs in that basket.
Right. So how many tries do you want to have before you're willing to not make that bet?
I didn't put that in this presentation because it's like an entire, it would take a long time to explain, but there's basically some calculations that you can do about how big of a bankroll do you need in poker in order to sustain yourself forever. And so you want to look at how long could I survive if I lost this money? Do I have some savings that I could live off of until I could find another opportunity or get a different job? Right? Those are things that are personal decisions if you need 3 months of living expenses or 2 years of living expenses, but it deals with that. So this should be an easy decision, assuming you're crossing that threshold that James just mentioned to purchase. Especially because it's really highly unlikely you're going to lose all of your money half the time, right? Even if, unless you just like lay down and go to sleep and do nothing with the business, you're probably going to make part of your money back, which means that this number is even higher because 50% of the time you're not going to lose your 15K.
So when you're doing your EV calculations, you're not saying 50% I'll get 24K and then 50% I'll get, you know, at least 8K back of this. You're not doing it that way. You're really doing it 50K, I'd lose the whole thing.
In this case, to make it simple, we're going to get more complicated. You can totally do this where half the time I make this, right? 10% of the time I lose 15K, 10% of the time I lose 12K, 10% of the time I lose 10K, 10% of the time I lose 5K, and 10% of the time I break even. And you can still run the EV calculation that way. You need to be able to make decent estimates, though. Without being able to make decent estimates of the percentage, this does not work. So EV for umbrella insurance. James has been waiting for this one. So there's a stat from some years ago, a long time ago, so it's probably not true anymore, that 97% of lawsuits result in the judgment of less than or equal to $3 million. So if you get sued, you probably are going to be at this amount or under. So umbrella policy for $3 million costs $3,000. I assume there's a $1,000 deductible. I actually don't even know if the umbrella policy has a deductible. I don't think it does. Brian, does it have a deductible usually? All right.
Brian says it
Thanks.
depends.
Well played, sir. So let's estimate there's a 1% chance of a judgment against you. You probably know 100 people. How many judgments do you know against those people? I was like, man, not many. So assume the average judgment of this 1% is 500,000, so they don't have to put, 0.5% of the time it's 1 million. I'm assuming the average of that 1% is 500,000. We could break that down further, but if we run this, I'm not going to just really quick to get through the slide. With insurance, your expected value is $2,000. Without insurance, it's negative 5,000. Which one should you pick? Insurance. You should have insurance. Brian, should you have insurance? Absolutely. Right. So this is actually an odd case. This slide probably took me longer than any other slide because it's weird. To use for EV is you're not making the same bet in both cases. Right? In one, you're actually buying an insurance policy and you have a deductible. In the other one, you're not. So you're not making the same bet to get a different return. So it's a little weird for EV, but James really wanted me to put this in this presentation, so I did. So EV for convincing a tenant to stay. You have a tenant and they're like, hey, I'm going to move out because you raised my rent from $8.95 to $9.95. Well, huh? In Iowa. Apparently in Iowa. So they say, yeah, I'm out of here. Let's do the EV calculation for them without showing them all the math, right? Because if you showed them an EV calculation, they'd be like, get out, right? So moving truck in time, how much does that cost? Let's say $300, higher rent, $50 a month. If you move somewhere else, you're probably paying more. There's an extra $600. Carpet cleaning and cleaning fees when you move out. You're gonna have $600 deducted from your damage deposit. Tenant damages and repairs. I've walked around your apartment. There's at least some stuff you're getting charged for. Right? Not to mention you've got a new security deposit and first month's rent. So you're leaving because you're going to have to pay an extra $1,200 this year. Even if we ignore these, if we add these up and say, hey, take $1,200 out of that, you're still spending $700 more in the next year. Not to mention, we're not including these. We include those, it's almost $3,000. You sure you want to move? However, what can a tenant say? I also know how to play poker, Brian. Let me tell you what the EV is on the flip side. You're going to have vacancy, you're going to have upgrades, you're going to have turnover costs, and they can use this to lower their rent by negotiating with you. So this one's definitely a double-edged sword. Be careful how you use it. Ask them if they played poker first. Do you know what EV is? No? Then I have a conversation for you. So, using expected value for real estate investing. We can use this to basically look at our earlier property investment where we were going to do some upgrades. So it's going to cost us $4,000, if you remember this example, to do some work to maybe get $8,000 of rent across the next 3 years. So EV, why does it say EV1? Oh, yes. This is basically, we're going to estimate 75% of the time we actually get that $4,000. 25% of the time we don't. We lose our $4,000 investment, right? We got $8,000 extra minus the $4,000 of what it cost. So 75% of the time we're getting $4,000. 25% of the time we lose our $4,000. What's the expected value? $2,000. Should you make this upgrade? Yeah, unless you have a better alternative. So let's compare. What if we could also do $10,000 in upgrades to get $20,000 more in rent across the same 3 years? Let's estimate that that happens 30% of the time. So 30% of the time we basically get an extra $10,000 in rent, and 70% of the time we lose that $10,000 that we spent. It's minus $4,000 in EV. Should we make this decision? No. See how simple that decision can be? Literally estimate the possibility and what it's going to cost in each scenario, and then multiply those and add them together, and you have your expected value. Does everyone see and understand that calculation?
It seems like the tricky part is estimating the odds that it's going to happen, like the 30% of the time. I think that seems like going to be the sticking point.
I'll probably get there in the next slide. So in this case, we probably don't really lose $10,000 70% of the time, though, right? That seems like, well, 70% of the time, are we really going to lose the full $10,000? We probably get, part of that each time. And so you could rerun that calculation and see, hey, if we were a little more detailed in our estimates, maybe the expected value is $750. Should we make this decision? If it's the only one, yes, and we believe our estimates. But we have a better decision that makes us more money by making it. We should choose the better decision. So this is evaluating all of your alternatives. Don't let me get by that question if I don't answer it. So buying a property. So I went and I used the spreadsheet. I typed in some property stuff, and I basically came up with these numbers, right? These are real numbers based on a real property and different rent amounts. So I looked at that and I went, based on what I know about the rental market, by doing comps, I think it's pretty easy that I would at least get $16.95, right? So it's not so likely because I think the majority of my rent's going to be $17.95 to $19.95. So I assigned percentages to those, and this was the cash flow spit out by that spreadsheet that you guys all have access to for each particular rent amount. So we can easily take that and go, okay, this one's negative. Well, that sucks. However, is this a bet we should make? And obviously, since most of them are positive, you can probably tell if you multiply these percentages by these cash flows, this is what you're going to get, and it sums to $1,618. So every time you make the bet of buying this property, you're basically having an expected value of $1,618 in cash flow per year. You may well end up with a year that's negative $310 or worse. But when you made the bet based on everything you knew, your expected value was positive. You can make this super complicated, which I did not do for tonight, thankfully, because we'd go long if I did. But you could take this to all sorts of things. Vacancy, right? Instead of just having rent and what the cash flow is, you could have incorporated rent at this, vacancy at this, expenses at this, and done a really, really complicated EV calculation where it would be difficult to estimate what the percentages are.
We're going to do Monte Carlo for that.
Yep. So James can do that for you. And it's unlikely you can actually accurately estimate those. So don't. You can use EV as a tool for buying. However, in my opinion, it's much more useful to use the spreadsheet, use Monte Carlo, use the calculator that James is working on for long-term stuff, and use this for decisions where it's, hey, I can spend $4K on upgrades. How much more in rent am I going to get? It's a much easier thing to use it for. You can also run scenarios and calculate EV in the future. But again, this is even more complicated. What's appreciation going to be 5 years from now? I don't know. How am I going to estimate that? Right? That's very difficult. However, what you can use this for is to give you kind of a longer term view of the worst case. So if you wanted to improve your confidence for something like, well, I'm really worried about a downturn in Fort Collins. Okay, let's assign some numbers to that. Where's my numbers? Here we go. 3-year outlook, market downturn. There's a 5% chance of minus 20% in 3 years. Does everyone think that's reasonable in Fort Collins? People are like, no, it's going to go up. But 5% of the time in the next 3 years, do you think we could go down 20%? Is that more aggressive than you believe?
Historically, that has never happened.
Right. Historically, it's never happened. So 10% of the time, I said down 10%. 20%, I said down 5%. 30% I said up 5%, 20% up 10, and 10% up 20. I'm probably being really conservative. However, if you run this, the EV is still up 2.5%. So if you're like, oh, I'm super scared to buy property right now because I'm scared of a market downturn, and you say, well, I think it's, a 10% chance of us going down 10%, but otherwise we're even or better, you can use expected value to overcome that fear. Does that make sense? Perfect. And again, you have to be able to accurately assess what these percentages are, or at least assign them and be aggressive, right? I don't believe there's a 5% chance of us going down 20% in 3 years, right? And you could just combine all those and say, hey, is there a 20% chance we go down 5% in the next 3 years? Whatever it is you think is reasonable, talk to James, look back in history, look in other markets, and try and decide what an accurate percentage is. So, comparing investments. Same thing, you can imagine how you're going to use this. You're going to calculate the EV for one investment, calculate the EV for a second investment, and then look at the two, like we've already done with our examples. I was talking to Royce, who hopefully is off winning his championship softball game tonight. He's like, you know what you could use this for? Portfolio optimization. And I was like, I'm not teaching that. But essentially, you could evaluate how each property would perform using expected value and act accordingly. So you could basically say, hey, this property is my worst expected value property. I'm going to sell it and replace it with something better. Interesting concept. 2 different options. Should you invest in real estate or should you invest in the stock market? Go run some expected value calculations on what you expect to get from the stock market. Use historical returns. Use what you think you're going to get. Do your estimates the best that you can. Assign those percentages, calculate the EV, and then choose the best one. So here's the graph. This is why I'm telling you EV choices are better than just making the safe choices. if you just go by emotion and avoidance of risk, this is what your choices are going to look like. Is this better than you losing money? Yes. However, where could you end up? Right? Yes. Does this suck? Yes. Does this suck? Yes. Does this suck? Yes. But overall, if you consistently make positive EV choices, you're going to end up much further ahead than you will if you try to avoid the risk. Right? Obviously, you have to be able to accurately assess what those percentage chances of the outcomes are, and you have to have a bankroll or enough reserves to not be out of the game. But outside of that, make those positive EV choices. So, to summarize, the goal is to make money. We're not here to lose money. We're trying to make money, but you don't have to win all the time. You don't have to win every bet you make in order to make more money. And that's a strange concept. You don't need to win every time in order to come out further ahead. You need to make more positive bets to come out further ahead. You can take all the poker skills we've talked about tonight and basically apply them and help yourself make positive EV decisions. The really cool thing about real estate versus poker is that in poker, you're stuck with doing one thing at one point in time, and you only get one choice. You either get to bet, raise, check, fold, or call. In real estate, you can do a lot of things to help improve your return. So real estate has a lot more flexibility than poker in that sense. I only get one shot to make the right decision in poker. If I make the wrong one in real estate, I can do something different. So real estate's way more flexible. I can go raise rents, hire a property manager, right? Improve my properties. Lots of stuff, lots of options. Just because it's plus EV doesn't mean you should do it. You should find the most profitable EV decision and do that. So take some time, look at all the options, and then pick the best one. And they may not be the obvious one, right? Remember betting 50, 150, or 450? 450 to most people seems like, no, you won't make any money, but you actually make a lot more. Again, make sure your financial situation can handle the variance. If it can't, and you're out of the game, you're going to lose. So you still have to make that decision for yourself. And don't bet everything on some super high variance possibility, right? You're like, oh, I've got $30,000, and I'm going to just shove it all in this one thing, and it says I can make 1,000,000%, or I can just lose my 30,000, right? Sounds great. What are the odds? Don't use emotion, right? Don't let emotion tie into your decisions. It doesn't matter if it's a pink bathroom in real estate. You can always paint it, right? But don't let emotion get caught up in, oh, I want to avoid the risk. It's if you don't take a little bit of risk, and in some cases more risk, the rewards are going to be much smaller. So how can you, for those of you that are like, I want more cash flow, or I want to get further ahead, using expected value can actually help you do that. Do you have a question?
I just, when you're end date, you want to make sure you hit the defined name percentages if possible.
Sure. You want me to answer this? That's all I had on the slides. Determining percentages.
Yeah, if you can just give some guidance as to how you think about that.
So, you want to give me an example of what you...
Like, how do you, I heard a lot of people, how many people in here said they use their calculator or their spreadsheet in order to determine risk when you're analyzing deals and stuff? Raise your hands really high. Okay, so how do you guys determine what the risk of a market turn is or your rents going down is? How do you determine that in your spreadsheet? And that's like to hear like your idea of percentages for how to do that.
I mean, for me, I try to overestimate what that would look like and make sure I'm still okay. So like when I perform a calculation across my portfolio of like how much can rents go down before I'm break even, like I want to understand like what's the worst that could happen before I'm break even, and then how much further beyond that could I actually withstand?
But then how do you evaluate what the odds are, or what the chance is that that's going to go down that low?
So I then take the market and I look at what's happened in the past, what are the worst things that have happened here done, what are the worst things that have happened in similar places like Fort Collins, and I think talking to other people that have been in the business a long time. Hey, when the real estate market turned down in 2008, how did it affect you, right? How much reserve do you actually think you should need? And understand it from the perspective of what's happened, not that it couldn't be worse in the future, but in likelihood, in 2008, I mean, we had a pretty big downturn in the United States. Is it going to be worse than that in the future? At some point, given an infinite amount of time, of course. But in our lifetime, hopefully not. But even if you model that same thing, you at least have a ballpark for making your decision. And if you think, hey, I want to model it so that it's twice as bad as that, then model it that way. It at least gives you, hey, it's still positive EV. I feel really good, and now I'm confident I can go make this aggressive offer on this property, buy it, and not lose money long term. Does that answer the question?
I think so. So what I almost hear you saying is when I'm doing the calculations and kind of modeling some of this stuff for you guys, is I should go pull historical data for appreciation rates, and ideally if I could find it, rent appreciation rates to show kind of like historically what we've seen and what percentage of those results we've had. So, X percent of the time we saw it decline by this percent, and do it that way.
And I think your Monte Carlo will also cover that in a.
It will, but the assumptions for the Monte Carlo to begin with is going to be a
it's the
challenge.
same thing.
It
yes.
is. It's the same question.
Yes. And so the goal isn't to make it specific. Like, how do I get? What if the market, 20% of the time downturns 20%, and 11% it's 19%. It's not that. You're trying to use expected value to give yourself a tool to say, hey, this is a good decision for me to make. It's a good bet to place. It's got positive EV. Here are my other 3 options based on what I know. And if you feel super confident, that's great. If you're confident in your numbers, that's great. If 2 of them you're like, I really am not sure, then don't use those, right? Go do more research to try and up your confidence in your percentages that you're assigning to the things that are going to happen. But is it really a big deal if it moves 2 or 3% in my example of rent? Probably not. And if your EV is really close to 0, then you're probably looking for another investment already anyway.
Is EV the same as the median of the Monte Carlo? Do you know?
I'd
have to think about that, but I just kind of thinking about it.
Probably not.
I think it might be.
Yeah.
Because that's the middlemost chance of something happening.
Yeah, but we
can talk about it later. Any other questions? Now that we went to Freaky Town with math.
I knew you wouldn't let me get out of it without some crazy math.
I'm kind of curious. I mean, I guess it's either the average or the median in my opinion, but maybe it's not.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. Any questions? Was this helpful? Kind of another way to look at risk and evaluate risk? Because I think a lot of people, they do the calculator. I mean, there's a lot of investors that don't do anything. And then there's a certain percentage of people that they use the spreadsheet, and that's the only thinking they do about it. If it has a positive cash flow, then they're all in. And they just decide to make an offer on that one.
Yeah.
And there's more to it, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Any final questions?
I think the other thing, too, is that once you've done enough EV calculations, and a lot of it comes from doing thousands and thousands a day, literally playing poker, once you've done enough, it becomes almost intuitive. Hey, that business decision, it's like half the time I'm going to make 24K, half the time I might lose 15K. You immediately know, yep, that's a good decision. And so some of that, once you are experienced in doing that, helps you have a time advantage on other people. You don't have to go home and spend 3 days analyzing it in the spreadsheet and trying to ask other people, is this the right thing? You just go, hey, James, write an offer, right? And he writes the offer, and you're the first one in, and you get the property because you made a full price offer instead of having to compete with 3 other people and make an above asking price offer. So learn to use that as a tool so that it can help you go faster too.
Awesome. Let's give Brian a round of applause. Thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it. Stick around for the class after the class. Do some networking if you want, and we'll see you soon.